The shutter clicked at 5:07 p.m. Mark David Chapman stood there, holding the camera steady, trying to keep his hands from shaking. He had been waiting since morning. 10 hours outside the Dakota, the Gothic apartment building on West 72nd Street that looked more like a castle than a place people actually lived. He had a copy of Double Fantasy tucked under his arm, the album John Lennon had just released, the one everyone was calling a comeback, the one that said Lennon was done hiding, done being silent, ready to make music again. Chapman wanted it signed. That's what he told himself. That's what he told the other fans gathered on the sidewalk, the ones who showed up every day hoping for a glimpse. Just a signature, just a moment. Just proof that he had been close to something that mattered. When Lennon walked out of the Dakota that afternoon, he was alone. No security, no entourage, just a man in a leather jacket, thin and older than the pictures made him seem, but still recognizably him. The face everyone knew, the voice everyone had grown up with. The Beatle who had become something else, an activist, a husband, a father, a recluse, and now maybe a musician again. Chapman called out. Not loud, just enough. Lennon stopped. He always stopped. That was the thing about him. He could have kept walking. He could have ignored the fans, the autograph seekers, the people who wanted pieces of him. But he didn't. He stopped, smiled that crooked half-smile, and walked over. Chapman handed him the album. Lennon took it, pulled out a pen, and signed his name across the cover in blue ink. Clean. Confident. The signature of someone who had done this 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. And then Chapman asked if he could take a photo. Lennon shrugged. Sure. Chapman handed his camera to another fan, a guy he didn't know, someone who had been standing nearby hoping for the same thing. The guy took the camera, stepped back a few feet, and framed the shot. Lennon stood in front of the Dakota's entrance, the iron gate behind him, the archway looming dark and heavy. Chapman moved next to him, close enough to feel the reality of it. The fact that John Lennon was standing right there, breathing the same air, existing in the same moment. The shutter clicked. And in that photograph, in the background, just barely visible through the archway behind Lennon's left shoulder, there was a figure. Blurred. Indistinct. Just a shape, really. Standing in the shadows of the Dakota's interior courtyard. Far enough back that the camera didn't focus on it. Close enough that it was there. Undeniably there, in the frame. No one noticed it at the time. Not Chapman, not Lennon, not the fan who took the photo. It was just another picture, another autograph. Another moment in a day that would end 5 hours later, with 3 gunshots and a body on the pavement and the world breaking in a way it still hasn't fully repaired. But later, after the photo was developed, after it was examined and circulated and analyzed, people started asking questions. Who was that in the background? What were they doing there? And why, in every account of that day, in every timeline, and every witness statement, did no one mention seeing anyone else? The Dakota in 1980 was not an easy building to access. You couldn't just walk in. There were doormen. There was security. There was a system designed specifically to keep people out, to protect the residents. Famous people, wealthy people, people who needed protection from the world outside. Lennon had lived there since 1973. He knew the building. He knew the staff. He knew who belonged and who didn't. So who was the figure in the photograph? The first theory was simple. A resident. Someone who lived in the building, passing through the courtyard at the exact moment the photo was taken. Random. Coincidental. Nothing sinister. Just bad timing. But the residents were asked. All of them. And none of them remembered being in the courtyard that afternoon. None of them remembered seeing Lennon sign autographs. None of them remembered a group of fans with cameras. The staff was asked too. The doormen, the maintenance workers, the people who moved through the Dakota every day and knew its rhythms, its patterns. They said the same thing. No one was supposed to be in that courtyard. It wasn't a public space. It wasn't a hallway. It was an interior area, accessible only to residents and staff, and even they rarely used it. So if no resident was there, and no staff was there, who was? The second theory was darker. Someone connected to Chapman. An accomplice. Someone who had been watching, waiting, making sure Lennon was where he needed to be when Chapman came back later that night. It made sense in the paranoid logic of conspiracy, the kind of thinking that emerged in the weeks after Lennon's death, when people couldn't accept that one troubled man with a gun could end someone so enormous. There had to be more. There had to be a plan. There had to be someone pulling strings. But the investigation found nothing. Chapman acted alone. He had no accomplices, no co-conspirators, no one helping him. He waited outside the Dakota all day, got his autograph, went to a nearby diner, ate a sandwich, came back and fired 4 shots when Lennon returned home that night. Simple. Devastating. Alone. So the figure in the photograph remained unexplained. Some people said it was nothing. A trick of light. A shadow cast by the archway. Distorted by the camera's depth of field. Made to look like a person. When it wasn't. Pareidolia. The human brain's tendency to see faces and figures in random patterns. Clouds. Wood grain. Blurred photographs. But others looked at the image and saw something different. Not a shadow. Not a trick. A person. Standing very still. Watching. One forensic photographer, someone with no connection to the case, no reason to lie, analyzed the photo years later. He said the figure was real. Not a shadow, not an artifact of the film. A human being, standing approximately 15 feet behind Lennon, partially obscured by the archway but visible enough to determine posture, rough height, and positioning. He also said something else. The figure was facing the camera. Not turned away, not in profile. Facing it. Facing Lennon. Facing the moment that was being captured. Like they knew, like they were waiting for it. Yoko Ono saw the photograph once. She was shown it by a journalist years after John's death. Someone writing a book about the assassination. Someone who thought she might have answers. She looked at it for a long time. Longer than the journalist expected. And then she handed it back and said one sentence. I don't want to talk about this. She never explained why. She never looked at the photo again. And when asked in later interviews about anything unusual that day, anything out of place, anything that didn't feel right, she gave the same answer. I don't want to talk about this. The other fans who were there that afternoon were tracked down over the years. Most of them remembered the moment. Remembered Lennon being kind. Remembered him signing autographs, taking photos, being more generous with his time than he needed to be. But none of them remembered seeing anyone in the courtyard. None of them remembered a figure in the background. None of them could explain it. Except one, a woman named Sarah, who had been 17 at the time, standing at the edge of the crowd, too shy to ask for an autograph, but desperate to be close, to be part of it. She saw the photo decades later on a documentary and called the filmmaker. She said she remembered something. Not clearly, not with certainty, but something. She said that when Lennon was signing Chapman's album, she glanced past him, through the archway into the courtyard, and she saw someone, just for a second, a person standing very still, far enough back that she couldn't see their face, couldn't tell if they were male or female, young or old, just a figure, watching. She said she looked away because it felt wrong. Not dangerous, not threatening, just wrong. Like seeing something you weren't supposed to see. Like catching someone in a private moment they didn't know was being observed. And when she looked back, the figure was gone. She never mentioned it to anyone. She convinced herself she imagined it, because what else could it have been? Who would just stand there, in the shadows, watching John Lennon sign autographs? It didn't make sense. So she filed it away, let it fade, tried to forget. But she never did forget. And when she saw the photo, when she saw the figure in the background, blurred and indistinct but undeniably there, she said it felt like confirmation. Not of conspiracy, not of some grand plan, but of something smaller, something stranger, that someone had been there, watching, and no one knew why. The photograph became a minor obsession in certain corners of the internet. Forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries, Reddit threads, YouTube videos with ominous music and slow zooms on the blurred figure. People analyzed it frame by frame, enhanced it with software, compared it to other photos taken that day, tried to find patterns, tried to find meaning. Most of it was noise, speculation, people seeing what they wanted to see. But there was one detail that kept coming up. One thing that multiple people, working independently, analyzing different copies of the photo, all noticed. The figure's posture. It wasn't casual. It wasn't the stance of someone passing through, someone caught mid-step on their way somewhere else. It was still, deliberate. The posture of someone standing exactly where they wanted to be, doing exactly what they intended to do, watching. And if you looked closely, if you really studied the shape of the figure, the way the shadows fell, the way the light caught the edges, it looked like they might have been holding something. Not a weapon, not anything dramatic. A camera, which meant that at the exact moment Chapman was taking a photo of John Lennon, someone else might have been taking a photo of Chapman taking a photo of John Lennon. And if that was true, then somewhere, maybe in a drawer, maybe in a box, maybe lost or destroyed or forgotten, there might be another photograph. One taken from inside the courtyard. One that shows Lennon's back, shows Chapman's face, shows the moment from a different angle. A photograph that, if it exists, has never surfaced, has never been shared, has never been explained. The NIPD was asked about it. They said they had no knowledge of any second photographer. No evidence of anyone else being present. The case was closed. Chapman confessed. There was no mystery, but the photograph says otherwise. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. A blurred figure in the background of a moment that would, 5 hours later, become one of the most infamous in modern history. A figure that shouldn't have been there, that no one can explain, that no one can identify. And the question, the one that lingers, the one that people keep coming back to, isn't about conspiracy. It isn't about whether there was a second shooter, or a government plot, or some elaborate scheme. The question is simpler. Who was watching? And if they were watching, what did they see? Because the photo Chapman has, the one he kept, the one that was examined as evidence and later returned to him in prison where he still sits today, shows John Lennon smiling, relaxed, open, generous. A man who had no idea he had 5 hours left to live. A man who stopped to sign an autograph for someone who would kill him. A man who stood in front of a camera and let a stranger get close because that's who he was. And behind him, just barely visible, just barely there, something watched. Not something. Someone. And whoever they were, whatever they were doing, whatever they saw or knew or captured on film, they never came forward. They never explained, they never revealed themselves, they just watched. And then they disappeared. The photo still exists. It's been published in books, shown in documentaries, analyzed by experts. And every time someone looks at it, every time someone notices the figure in the background, the same question comes up. What did the camera catch? And the answer, the real answer, the one that no amount of investigation or analysis or enhancement can provide, is this: we don't know. We'll probably never know. And maybe that's worse than any conspiracy, worse than any plot, because it means that in John Lennon's final hours, in a moment that should have been simple and safe and ordinary, something was wrong. Something was there. Something was watching. And it was captured on film. But it will never be explained.